Yesterday, I was out in my garden when I began to admire my ferns. However, a question popped into my mind. They've grown a lot and look beautiful, sure, but what do they even do? I mean, while all the other plants in my garden were busy fruiting, producing flowers, or attracting butterflies as larval host plants, the ferns were just sort of there, sitting and growing. They were doing the same thing they've done for 4 years since I planted them there. So I started to wonder, what do ferns do in an ecosystem? First of all, let's discuss what ferns don't do and why that makes them unique. Ferns don't produce fruit. In fact, they don't even produce seeds. They just produce spore pods on the undersides of their leaves. When the fern matures, those spore pods turn a rusty brown and open up, releasing the spores. This is because ferns are cryptogasms, which means they do not produce seeds. In fact, they evolved millions of years before seed-producing plants became the norm. Secondly, ferns do not produce wood. While some species called tree ferns tend to grow tall, they do not produce true wood. Instead, they stack up old vascular roots which funnel water to the crown. And finally, ferns do not produce flowers. This is because, like with fruits, ferns evolved millions of years before the first flowers bloomed on Earth. Essentially, ferns are living fossils still using strategies that were common 390 million years ago during the Devonian period. But then what do they do today? Ferns tend to act as pioneer species, which means that they are often one of the first species to appear in disturbed sites, such as old farmland or an abandoned building. They tend to grow fast and send runners, which sprout up new ferns, which means that they can colonize large areas in a short amount of time. Ferns also tend to grow on relatively poor soil, which means that when they die, they add more nutrients to the soil than there were to begin with. Ferns also have vast systems of shallow roots, which tend to stabilize soil and prevent erosion. So over time, ferns tend to do a lot for soil health, adding nutrients by decaying and stabilizing it. Their second biggest role is as shelter for small animals and insects. Ferns essentially act as mansions for small insects and animals. So in conclusion, while ferns may not produce fruit or flowers, they are still extremely useful towards an ecosystem, especially in the early stages of it as pioneer species.